Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about React Native in our Building with OpenTok series. My name is Manik, and I'm a developer evangelist at TalkBox. But before we begin, I want to talk a little bit about the agenda and some of the other webinars that we do. Alrighty, just a second. As I mentioned, this is part of a series. We've covered an embeds projects. Today we're covering React Native, and our next episode is going to be on Electron. But feel free to use the polls and the questions to suggest new topics that you'd like us to cover. We also cover key product topics in GDPR and customer interviews with the people who are using us. So that's definitely a part of our webinar series as well. Today's agenda is going to be focused on React Native, what that is, OpenTok basics, OpenTok React Native, the library, and building iOS and Android apps, and then using that to and combining that with OpenTok React, which is our web component, so you can maximize code when you're building your mobile and web apps. So why React Native? As you've heard, React Native lets you build mobile applications with JavaScript and React. It uses the exact same design system as React, and the key takeaway is you learn once and you write everywhere. So that's really great about React and React Native. And they're building native applications, so you're not doing a web view. It's actually using the same building blocks for our UI that we use in regular iOS and Android applications. So that's really great about React Native. Next, I'd like to talk about our basics for OpenTok. We have the concept of sessions, tokens, and publishing and subscribing. So we're going to break these down into just a little details, and then go actually build the React Native application. So a session is like a chat room. It's a room where users can interact and connect to each other. It has a unique session ID associated to it, and it's generated usually by your app server with a server SDK that TalkBox provides, or the account dashboard, which is how we'll be generating that today. And it's where users can publish and subscribe to video streams. So, and we'll talk about authenticating to that using a token. So a token is a user's key. So it's like my credentials to this specific chat room, and I use it to authenticate. It expires after a certain period of time, which I can specify as the developer, and it can contain metadata describing information about this as user. Obviously, we don't want to use token to add personally identifying information, but it can be used to add other kinds of information about that user. And publishing and subscribing. So just think of publishing as a way for you to send video and audio on the other end, and the subscriber can see you. So a subscriber is a person who is watching your stream, and you're the publisher in that sense. And we do have a little diagram here that might make it a little easier on explaining the concept. So here's a session, and client 1, which is person A who's publishing, and subscribing to possibly client 2 who's also publishing. And here's your app server that's generating the session ID and tokens that you're giving to the client. So just some simple concepts there, and don't want to take this on too longer, but I'm going to jump into the Developer Center to show you more resources that are available to you to help understand developer guides, sample applications, our basics, and the different tools that we offer. We also have a fast track, which will, allow you to build a fast track tool so you can have all the information that you need for building that application right in one area. And you can also sign up here by clicking or get your API key. So next, I want to go ahead and to create a project. So we're going to go ahead and create a project for this specific webinar, and we're going to create a standard project, and a standard project is where we'll be accessing the full-on API. But if you want to build something with embeds, we did a webinar just before this episode, so you can check that out as well. So I'm going to call this React Native webinar. Oh, excuse me. So I'm going to click next, and as you can see, it generated some API key and secrets for me, and it'll talk about my consumption and other information that's available, like archiving and tension monitoring and different tools that we have. So after creating this, we're actually going to just jump into creating a React Native project. So I'm going to go here into my terminal, and hopefully this is big enough for everybody to see. And here I'm just going to, using the React Native CLI tool, I'm going to create a project called Talk React. You can name it whatever you'd like, but this is going to go through the installation process real quick, and then I'll walk you through adding OpenTok React Native, the library, and then how to use that API to build the live video app for iOS and Android. So just a second while that happens, just installing information. Perfect. So now that that project's been created, I can change it to that directory, and I can add yarn add OpenTok React Native. So this is us adding the library to our project. And this is available on NPM. The documentation is also there, and we do have sample applications that we're using this projects, the signaling sample and the basic video chat. So now that we've added this, we actually want to change directory into our iOS folder and using CocoaPods so we can download the OpenTok iOS SDK. So this is a requirement for the React Native wrapper. So the React Native library builds on top of our iOS SDK that we have. So I'm going to do something called pod init, and this should initialize a pod file for me. So I'm going to actually show you that. Oh, interesting. But let's just open that in our VS Code real quickly. So just a second while I pull that up. As you can see, I have a bunch of folders that I do things on. So just give me a second while I pull up our project. Let me drag that from my other screen. Perfect. So this is the iOS folder that we created a pod file in. We just need to we need to change this to platform iOS 9. That's what we're targeting. We don't really need any of these targets for our project, but you can leave them in there if you'd like. Not going to worry about these or the tvOS tests, but I do need to add pod OpenTok, this is the name of our iOS SDK and on CocoaPod, and we are use frameworks because our React Native library is written in Swift, so this is required for you to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to jump back to our terminal. And now since we're at terminal in the iOS folder, we're going to say pod install. And for those of you who are JavaScript developers, this is more like the npm install or yarn add that we use the same way, just another package manager, CocoaPods, where we can install dependencies. As you can see, it installed the OpenTok 2.13 SDK, so that's the latest version of our SDK for iOS. And now let's actually open this in Xcode. And Xcode, so this is a requirement for you to be able to use the library because Xcode is where you develop your iOS apps. Excuse me. So it's the same folder that we have, and looks like I'm losing my screen here, as you can see. So I'm going to actually open the Xcode workspace file because we're using CocoaPods. So that's the requirement. You have to use Xcode workspace and not your Xcode proj file. But if I go into here, I want to be able to add all the library resources. So the way it currently works, you have to manually add the files that are for the iOS project, but we are working to make this process a little easier and using the React Native link command to add those files. So I'm going to go ahead into the node modules here, and in the node modules, I can find our OpenTok React Native library. I apologize for the bunch of scrolling, but I'll stop where we go. So I'm going to go ahead and add these files to our project. And after adding these files, it's going to prompt me to create a bridging header. This is actually needed to expose our Swift library through Objective-C. So we're going to add this right here. And in our bridging header, we're going to add some information. So I'm going to switch over code editors. So I apologize for that. But I need to add the information in the other bridging header that comes actually in the library, so you don't have to worry about what it is. You just go into the OpenTok React, the iOS folder, and this bridging header file, you're going to simply copy paste this into your bridging header file here. And we're going to go ahead and not build yet because we need to actually use the API in JavaScript. So that's just the installation process for iOS. Super easy, just a couple of commands and just adding the files into your project. But let's go to our app.js file. And this is where we're going to be using the JavaScript React Native API for OpenTok and building the live video application with the concept of sessions, publishers, and subscribers. So as you can see, this is the standard project that comes with a lot of stuff. We don't really need it for our use case, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'll leave the styles in because we're going to be using the style right here. It doesn't really matter, and we don't really need to import platform. We don't really need text, so we'll leave that as is. But we need to get our information from our OpenTok React Native library. So I can get this OT session component, OT publisher component, and OT subscriber component. So these are components that are available for you to use the OpenTok React Native API. And we're going to say, okay, OT session. And we do need an API key, which is a prop. And this is how you're going to feed in your information API key, the session ID that we spoke about earlier, and the token, which is your authentication to that room. This component has, you can have children in this component, such as publisher, and we're going to give the publisher a style. So we're going to say we want this publisher to be 100 by 100, so we'll give it a width and height of 100, and we'll close this, and we'll do the same thing with subscriber. So these components actually take care of the whole init publisher, and subscriber stream creator events that we have, and so you don't have to worry about subscribing manually. So let's do that right here. But you can definitely feed in props such as event handlers through. These are props available in the session, publisher, and subscriber components if you want to have your specific event handlers that you're listing to. But before we get deeper, I'm going to actually use our account dashboard to generate these credentials right here so we can actually see the live video in action. So I'm going to go ahead to my account portal and click Create Session ID. I'm going to copy that session ID over. You'll see this confirmation that's been copied over. Back to my VS Code, and I'll throw it in here. And I'll do the same thing for my API key. So I'm going to copy my API key, and I'm going to go ahead and feed it in here. And then I'm going to create a session. So, a token. And the token has to be for the session ID. Let's just give it for 6 hours. And I can input connection data in here, but we don't have any. So simply just going to create and copy it over and add it to our project. So obviously you'd want to be generating this through your app server so you can have dynamic session room generation and tokens associated with it. Excuse me. But this is just a way to do it for a simple prototype that we've done. So after this, I'm going to change it. So using the properties prop, I'm going to say publish audio false so we don't get any audio feedback with the current publishing we're doing. So now this looks all good to me. But if you want more information on how this is working, you can simply go to npm.js. This link right here that's also available in the links that we've sent in the webinar, and you can see the documentation on how to install, how to use these, and what props are available and whatnot. So I'm going to go back to my Xcode and press build. And this is going to take a while for your initial build, but with React Native, the best part is you're going to be able to reload much quicker after this. So after this builds initially, we'll be able to see it working. While we wait for that, I just want to remind you that we do have a poll, so please do answer that and take your time to say, hey, I used React Native or web, and ask questions so we can answer that at the end of this webinar. So this is going to be building, and it should be done hopefully within the next 30-40 seconds. So be waiting on it real quick. This is actually going to load your bundler for you. So the bundler that's required to run all your JavaScript is going to be loaded when you press the play button, or you can load it with yarn start or npm start, however you'd like to do it. And this is the bundler I'm talking about. This is just launching our bundler right here, so we can have all the JavaScript running. As you saw, it was just pressing the play button on the build button, and the Xcode launched it, or you can launch it through command line using yarn start or npm start. And after this, we'll be walking over on how to do the Android version as well. So we won't have to change any of our JavaScript. Simply just have to add the library to the Android project, and you should be good to go. Excuse me. While we wait, I also want to mention that we have a signaling sample available, and signaling is a way to send data from one endpoint to another, the client who's connected in the session. So you can definitely use that to build a text chat. We wrote a blog on it as well, so it's a code walkthrough. So definitely check that out when you get a chance as well. Perfect. So our simulator is launching, and let me make the bundler is to make the bundler bigger, but it doesn't really just on the bundling, and hopefully we can see our screen here for the application. So you'll see the bundler loading all the JavaScript in just a second. So as you can see, it's bundling here, and we'll be seeing it. For a production application, you'd obviously not want to do this bundling. You'd have to bundle it all at once and package it with an application so you can submit it to the App Store or the Play Store. So you wouldn't be able to do that. So great. So now we're publishing. This is the iOS simulator, as you can see. This is us publishing, and all the code that was required was what we added in our JavaScript. And to show you how a subscribing would work, I'm going to actually use one of our tools called Playground. And Playground is a place where I can connect and use the OpenTok features, send signals, and practically a tool that we've built at TalkBox for you to use the platform features. I'm actually going to join an existing session. You can either create a session or join one, but since we already have a session ID, I'm going to go ahead and copy this over, the session ID that we have, and oops, paste it in here, and I'm going to leave my simulator on the side so you can see what's happening. I'm going to move my screen just a tad bit so you should see. At the bottom here, you can see that we're publishing from the simulator here, and I'm going to actually publish a stream here. And look up. Oh, it looks like I actually stopped it, so give me a second while that reloads. As you can see, the reload is going to be much faster, and I'm going to actually wait for it to publish, and I can publish here. So you can see me on the screen, the audio feedback from there. I'm going to use these to toggle the videos that I have. So that's our iOS real quick. I'm going to jump into Android. This out so I can speed up my laptop just a little bit, as you can see here, and unpublish my stream. And here we go. So now I'm going to disconnect in this session, and we'll walk through this again with the Android process. But before we get there, I actually want to link my Android OpenTok React Native library to my Android project. So the way I would do that is using the React Native link command. I would say OpenTok React Native. It's a library name, so that should be linking. So perfect. So that's step one of the installation process. Step two is actually adding the Maven information into your project Gradle file, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Just a second while Android Studio is launching, and there it is. And this is the benefit of using React Native. You can simply use the same code that you've written in JavaScript, and you can load up an application. That was another project, so let's open our new project called Talk React, and we will go to our Android. I'm just going to click this build Gradle file, and it's going to pick up the whole project for me. You'll see some initial messages saying the Gradle file has not been synced, and that's because we have this installation process here that we need to add. So this is your Maven URL that you need to add to your Android Studio project. And as soon as we do that, we should be good to go. So I'm going to go to my Gradle scripts, go to the build Talk React, and here I'm simply going to copy paste this from the installation instructions. As soon as I get that in, I'm going to say try again. Let's try to sync this again. So this is to use to download the Android SDK that we have. So similarly, we did this with CocoaPods, but here we're going to download it from Maven. You don't have to have CocoaPods installed or anything like that. That's totally separate for iOS. And it looks like everything is good. So we're going to actually press this play button and build button, excuse me. And let's load up a Pixel 2 using this. And that's actually loading on my screen. Let me do that real quick. You pull that emulator up. Oh, it looks like the emulator does not want to drag up to my screen. I'm going to actually go ahead and build this again. Hopefully I can grab the emulator and load it up. Just a second while we wait. As you can see, the bundler is now ready for our Android to be used, but it looks like my emulator has crashed. So just a second while that goes again. So we're going to go ahead and build this. And there it is. So this should be loading right here. That was a state that it saved later, but it should be loading our project. Just a second, and let's see how that goes. You can obviously see the logs here if you wanted, and that means our emulator's loading, so we're going to wait for that. It's just restarting, so just a moment on that, please. Now it's going to be loading information from the bundler that we have. And as you can see, it's bundling here, Android, and here's our simulator. So we saw the iOS simulator as like I think it's a tea kettle pot something, and here it looks like almost like a snake game that you have, but something bouncing around in green and red. So just to show you the subscribing in on this as well, I'm going to go into my playground, and let me minimize all this so it's easier for you all to see. Oh, it's not dragging. Oh. Okay, let's actually just go here, connect, and we are in the same session ID because we added that in our JavaScript. As you can see here, I'm publishing. I'm actually going to just simply publish here and pull my emulator, and you can see my screen on the emulator. So this is us, multi-party application. This will take care of multiple subscribers and publisher. So if I were to publish again, you can see that I'm there multiple times and I'm moving around. If I were to leave this, I apologize for not being able to have it next to it to show you how it works, but some reason, oh, there it is. I found the draggable area. Perfect. So if I exit this right here, you can see I'm gone. If I add it here, you can see I'm back again. So just like that, you can have a multi-party application with React Native for both iOS and Android using the exact same JavaScript code. I'm going to go ahead and exit this emulator real quick. And you can see it'll be gone right there as well. And just a second while I close my Android Studio as well. So as you can see, as soon as we disconnected, the playground detected that we're not there anymore, and the stream is not showing up. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect. Definitely use this tool. I really love this tool because I can have one endpoint as my product prototype that I'm building or the project that I'm building, and use the OpenTok Playground as the other endpoint for my client. So it was really simple. As you saw, we manually added session IDs here, but I just want to reiterate that this is something that your app server should be generating, not how you're doing it through the account dashboard. And the reason for that is the production application, you're going to have to generate many session IDs and have a room concept. So definitely won't be able to do that through the account dashboard. So we finished our iOS and Android development, and I'm going to go back to show you. This is the only code we needed. So a simple OT session component, OT publisher component, and these are the only components we really. Let me make this a little bigger for you to see and zoom in real quick. So these are the components that we needed. These have props, API key, session ID. You can also use the signaling here. So there's a signal prop for OT session component, so you can send and receive signals. But it's very similar to our OpenTok React component. I'm actually going to show you the quick documentation on OpenTok React, and that'll be showing you how you can add multi-party with that as well. So I'm just going to go to our OpenTok React page here on our npm.js, and let's see, API reference. So as we saw, it's very similar, the concept of OT session, OT publisher, and OT subscriber. And let me zoom in real quick to show you just a little better on what I was talking about. So session ID token. So once you learn the other API or this API, it'll be really easy to transition into the mobile end. And that's one really great thing about React and React Native is we can try to learn. The concepts are same. It's using the same design system. So not only you can have code maximization, but you could also learn one framework and try to write in multiple platforms and devices. So simple as that. Same concept of importing it from the OpenTok React library in this case, and then using these components to start the video. And you can find more information about this at the npm.js React OpenTok React package. So now I actually want to switch back and talk a little bit about our roadmap. So as you saw, we were able to publish screens. We were able to publish our screens, and we were not able to publish our screen, excuse me. We were showing publishers and subscribers, but we want to have the screen sharing available in React Native as well, and that's something that we're working on. Also working on making the distribution for iOS a little easier. So as you saw, we have to manually add those files. We're working to use the React Native link command, so it automatically detects the Xcode project and add that as a library to your project. So there's some great things that we're working on there. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my Twitter handle, Manik such, but you can also email me at manik@talkbox.com. And now we'd just like to take a look at our polls to see how they're going. So just give me a second while I switch that over. And there we go. As you can see, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So I'm going to just take a look at our polls and see how they're going real quick. It's great to see that users are using both React Native and React JS. I'm a really big advocate for both. If you want to learn React or React Native, you should definitely check out our libraries, but also a lot of this great documentation that they have on their website. And it is an open source project, so we are also accepting PRs on this. So if you think you can help us improve our library, feel free to go to our OpenTok React Native GitHub repo and contribute, file an issue, or if you detect a bug, or any way you can help us improve, that would be great. So I'm actually going to click on the questions tab and see how we can answer some questions for you. So please go ahead and click ask the pop a question, I believe. It's on your end, and you should be able to see what questions others have asked and how we're going to answer them. Perfect. So the first one is, how many users can be in the same session? So you can have up to, I believe, 3,000 streams in one session. And a stream is like, if I'm publishing a stream, somebody's subscribing, that's 2 streams. So in that sense, I believe it's around 55 people, but obviously you wouldn't want that because your laptop might not be able to support it as a hardware because there's a lot of hardware encoding and decoding going on. So generally, there's about 20 to 30 people in a session. You can handle that, but it really depends on what your hardware can handle. But you should definitely use the broadcast model here. So if you want to have a lot of people, you should use our interactive live broadcast, and just like we are, or you could use an HLS broadcast where you can go out to the masses. And you can also use our RTMP features to connect your Talkbox sessions essentially to Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or Instagram Live, and other RTMP vendors essentially. And the resolution. So I believe currently the resolution is at 720, but we can check. We are working on improving that. So yeah, the next one. What do we want to archive this stream? So if you want to record the stream, you just simply have to make a REST call with the session ID, and you should do that to your server side. Should make that REST call with the session ID, and you should be able to archive the whole video of the session. Next, I'm going to check. Okay, so React Native library, we've been using the call stack library. What is the difference? So initially we checked out the call stack library because we wanted to see if there's an open source solution that we can work with the team, but looks like the call stack library went a different way, and it wasn't in line with how we made our OpenTok React library. And we wanted to have a way where our developers don't have to learn multiple APIs for React and React Native. So we wanted to really build off of what we had created for OpenTok React, and also I think keep it in line with how Talkbox's APIs work. So just a little changes here and there, and it's something that it's a lab solution that we created, and something that we're actively be maintaining. So I'm not, for call stack, I'm not sure how much of a priority it is for them to actually maintain this library. So there's just a bunch of differences in that sense. And how is video call quality over 4G? So it really depends on how many people you have in the call, what your bandwidth is, and what your network can hold. So I think it's hard to say of the question on what the call quality over 4G is. Would you rely on native mobile app developers as well? I think it really depends. I think if you are a team, let's say a team of developers who can develop both native, as in like using Objective-C, Swift, or Java, or Kotlin, and also know how to use JavaScript. I think it's great to use both together. Or if you're a team that is maybe resource constrained or something, have developers who know JavaScript and want to get into mobile, then React Native is definitely for you. But even Facebook, they definitely use React Native and their native application together. So they mix React Native within their Objective-C code. So I think if you could use both, I'd say go for it. If you only want, I would definitely go the React Native route. Are there any limitations? That's actually a really great question. So this is why some things that you can't do right now are like screen sharing, where you, with the native Swift or Objective-C or Java apps, you can, just give me a quick second. You can do screen sharing, you can have custom captures. Unfortunately, you can't do that with React Native yet, but I'm definitely working on an API where you can screen share. But besides that, you should be able to listen to every single session callback or publisher callbacks or even subscriber callbacks. You can definitely mix in the native code. I have another question that came in. We can definitely mix in native code with React Native, but for TalkBox, it's recommended to either go the native route or the React Native route and not to mix those because those bindings are built on top of our SDKs. So you should definitely do an either or situation on that one. Would React Native work directly on mobile browser as well? So React Native is used to build applications, and this is not where the web view comes in, but you can definitely incorporate a web view in React Native if you wanted to use the browser within the app, but you cannot use React Native in the mobile browser. You would have to use the web React. You got React.js essentially. Any other questions? React Native consists of single JavaScript thread. So yes, there's definitely the threading concern that we have. I think you can expose, the UI is usually run on the main thread, so you don't really have concern of that, and the rest is done through a background thread. But I definitely check with the React Native guys because they're better experts at it than I am on these kind of situations. Any other questions? Awesome. So as I mentioned, this is a series. This was our second episode. Oh, there's one more. So I'll take this as the last question. And you have to use JSX. Yes, you have to use that syntax style. You're not really using our regular, HTML DOM that we have where we have div tags and stuff. You have React Native APIs, which are written, you can use through JSX. So you have to, yes, JSX. So as I'm mentioning, this is a part of our series. The series, is where we build and live code. So it's not something that we package. As you saw, we saw the whole process of the bundling, the building, and it's we want to make it very easy for you to build. So definitely join our next episode on Electron. And after that, if you want to see some other Swift apps or Objective-C or Android apps, feel free to email me and we can make that a request or definitely post it here and we can help you out there. Thank you very much.